here. It's weird. I don't hear it on here. Okay, good morning, everybody.
Okay,
we're going to do contracts today. I hope everybody joins for our Ninja download. And today we've just got so much fun learning, right? Everybody feel like your head's full of knowledge. More knowledge is about to come. So I printed out, we're going to look through the residential contract because really all the changes that are in the residential contract are in the as-is contract. So we might as well look through the better one. Oh, did I say that out loud? Does anybody know that I have a preference between one contract or another? Oh, me? Ooh, what? Okay. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and I'm just going to jump in. I know people will continue to join. I still have people jumping in, but I want to get started because we've got a lot to cover. I did this class yesterday as a CE version and it took 3 hours. So I'm going to try to condense and just go through changes today so we can make it quick. Can everybody hear me okay? Just give thumbs up, everybody. Anybody? Wendy, can you hear me? Everybody?
Somebody said terrible sound.
Terrible sound?
It's going in and out.
Terrible sound. That's not good. All right, then maybe I will take it off the screen and maybe Trish, can you put it on the screen? Let's see. I'm going to take mine off the screen. Maybe if I take it off screen share. Let's see. We're going to try something here. Is my sound better? Can anyone tell me? Luce, is my sound better? Four things in the chat.
Yes.
Much better.
Okay, so I can't put it on. Okay, so hold on 1 second. Please hold. I'm gonna help you.
I disconnected my audio, so.
So it's you. We're gonna blame you.
Yeah, I'll take it. Hey, Dexter.
What's up, man?
What up, bro?
Man, life is good. Life is good.
I'm sad you're still trying to leave us.
Enter airplay. Where's the
The
airplay?
struggle is real. It's I have 1 more week left in this house. It's getting emotional.
That's all right. We got somebody to come visit in Texas.
Yes.
Hey, okay. All right. Maybe you have to turn your volume off. Mute.
Maybe you have to mute. Since she's on the screen because the sound is coming through the television.
Say it again. All right, let's see. Okay, is that better? Can you guys hear?
Yep.
Okay.
Someone's echoing.
Just turn your volume off.
Beverly, you need to mute.
Okay, yeah, Beverly. Let's see. Where do I mute Beverly? There's Beverly.
I disconnected my audio altogether.
Well, I don't know. You're a problem. I don't know what to say. Yeah, you are.
I didn't tell you that.
Good morning, all you beautiful, wonderful, sexy people.
Okay, is everybody? Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so is that better? Can you guys hear me okay now? Are we good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, terrific. So let's try this one more time.
Why is everybody frozen?
Everybody's frozen? I don't know.
Not on my computer. But
Okay, so we're going to share the screen. We're going to go for it anyway. All right, so we're just delving into the contracts. Everybody good? We hope so. And if you're not, well, you're just going to have to watch the recording later. Okay. So let's just move this to the side. So the residential contract, some big changes going on. Number one, I like what they tried to do here. Do I think it's enough? Not really, guys. But they're calling out some things that we know we've had issues with, like thermostat. You know, we have the nest, right? But guys, still, if you walk in a house and there's a nest, I'm going to write nest. Because if I just leave thermostat and I don't write nest, do I know that they didn't change out the thermostat when I go to the walkthrough? No. And can I stop a closing because they changed the thermostat? No, because there's still a thermostat there. So I'm still going to say, if you want the nest, write nest. right? A doorbell. Again, is it supposed to be the Ring? You know, again, if it's a Ring doorbell that they want, write the Ring doorbell here. If you're going to the listing appointment, they have a Ring doorbell, please, dear Lord, ask them, do you plan to leave that Ring doorbell? If you don't, say, you know what? I think it's a great idea to leave the Ring doorbell.
I'll buy you a new one.
I'll be happy to gift you a new one for $100 when you leave. Tatiani, we can talk about that deal that we almost didn't close because of a freaking Ring doorbell. So trust me. The television wall mounting hardware, I think that's a good call. Nobody knows, is it a fixture? Is it not? Just for fun, guys, what do we call the definition of a fixture? Anybody?
Anything glued, screwed, and nailed
Attached
to
to
the wall.
Anything glue, screwed, and nailed. That's an interesting one, sort of, kind of. It's really anything that'll damage the wall if you remove it.
Well, you would. if it
So
was
glue, screwed, and nailed
nailed.
kind of covers that, right? I go with that one. I kind of go with that one. But you know, rule of thumb, exactly. If you're going to mess up the wall when you remove it, or if it is something that will mess up the wall, then have them remove it and fix the wall if they want to take it before they leave. Okay. Storm protection items, hardware, that kind of stuff. Mailbox keys is a good one because people were not remembering the mailbox keys. So I'm glad they did add that. But again, I can't tell you enough. We just had a whole nother thing about, you know, those solar panel, those lights that you put outside that are solar lights. Are these fixtures? No. But if you've got a bunch of those are expensive. Those are things you're going to want to ask, are you planning on keeping there? Because you need to know that. You need to know if they're planning on conveying that. Because if they're not, you know, you need to know if they want to bring them or not. So just be very extra vigilant. This helps, but it is not the end all be all. So some good changes. All this stuff here, they tried to clean it up. They really didn't do much there. Again, collected, they tried to clean up that, not much done there. One thing that they did do here is that for closing, they are calling out that the closing date, the closing only happens. Are you ready? This is really cool stuff. When the funds are actually collected. It seems like that would have been understood before, but no, we used to have something called dry closings, if you remember, right? If you had a closing and it just meant that, you know, everybody came and signed the documents, but that really wasn't a closing. And like, did the people get the keys?
Yeah.
Like, you know, some people said, okay, some people said no. I'm a firm believer of hell no, but you know, that was sometimes up to the, you know, how the parties felt about it. But to date, they have now added it to the contract. It clearly states there is no closing until all funds are received
huge.
by the closing company. Yeah, it is huge. It is huge. It
Because
shouldn't be huge.
oftentimes we get everything back, but then, or they've signed, if it's a mail away, and then it doesn't fund until the following day. And
Yes.
the seller's like going,
Yes, as Maria said, sometimes they, you know, all parties have signed, but it's mail away and they don't get the funds until the next day, right? Or God forbid they signed on a Friday and they don't get the funds until Monday, right? So really, when was the closing? Monday. By the way, for those of you who are thinking about your commission, when is your commission earned?
Monday.
What's the
Monday. Not when all parties sign, but when the funds have transferred, right? Because that's really when the closing happens. And it really, if the title company doesn't send us the commission until, well, maybe they send it snail mail. We don't get out till
Yep.
Wednesday.
The difference between owed and earned.
Yeah,
It's a big difference.
there's a big difference between
Because
owed and
when they
earned. Thank
sign
you,
that
Alan.
contract, it's owed.
Mhm.
It's earned. when it-
Excellent point. Owed and earned. I like that. Okay. Any questions on that? So that's really, really great. I'm really glad that they're calling out the difference between them. And the other thing is I've seen it twice actually in the last few months. Really weird situations, both cases, where people signed it, actual funds were delivered to the title company, and then they were taken back. Yes,
By the lender or by the buyer?
by the lender.
Oh.
By the lender. Was one of them yours? No, it happened twice. Both
What was the
weird,
reason?
weird. One was it was the guy was a mortgage broker and the realtor and I mean, like, talk about Slim Shady doing way too many things, had his hand in way too many pots. Yeah, totally awful. The funds were approved. He sent the money. There was a commission ridiculous thing and he took the money back. Yeah, that could be a lot of disputes right there. But anyway, so there has been a lot of things, but the point is until all funds are there and dispersed, there's really no closing. Okay, guys? All right, the closing date, they just really cleaned up the language. So basically, in the event the closing funds from the buyer's lenders are not available, but really what they're saying here is we already know that the CFPB requirements state that the buyer has 3 days, right, to review those closing documents. We already know that. So remember, let's just review this scenario. Shane has the buyers and Susan has the sellers. And Susan's like, hey, Shane, are you going to come to closing? He's like, yeah. We're supposed to close on the 5th. Well, here we are on the 4th, and we still don't have the closing disclosure sent. Can we close on the 5th? No, because the buyers have not reviewed it. They need 3 days. Does Shane need an addenda? I'm going to ask you again. Does Shane need an addenda to extend the closing? I'm asking you again.
I guess
I
no,
would
because
get
this
one.
is saying we don't.
You don't because of this wonderful little paragraph right here. You have an automatic extension for the CFPB requirements. It used to be up to 10 days. Now you have up to 7 days. What's great about this is if the seller says, pound sand, I'm not giving you any extension, you say, well, thank you so much. You highlight this and send it back and say, you don't need to. You already did at the time of
But that
contract.
doesn't help us for the one up there on the mail away.
Yeah,
We
no.
need it for the extra day for funding.
Well, it depends
Because
on when the
when they
closing
closed it.
disclosures were sent.
Well, it would have had to.
It would have, yeah. So this is the thing. If you're supposed to close on the 5th and the closing disclosure goes out on the 6th, you're out of luck. That buyer is in default. Doesn't matter why. Doesn't matter if the buyer didn't have anything to do with it. It was Maria. Better not have been her fault. We're going after her, right? Because at that point, the buyer's out of contract and the buyer's in default. And if the seller says we're not extending, you're out of contract. The buyer loses the deposit unless the seller chooses to play, right? So in that instance, you better be proactive and get an addenda. But as long as that closing disclosure goes out by the closing day, you are covered by this little phrase here with the CFPB addenda. The only thing that has changed is that instead of an automatic extension up to 10 days, it's only now up to 7 days. I
They
don't,
still needed to deliver in writing that they had clear to close from their lender.
well, that's a different part we're going to talk about, but yes, but that's different. Okay.
Carrie, one question.
Uh-huh.
Did this language change on the as is too?
Yes,
Okay.
everything we are going over is the same on the as is in the residential. So we're looking at the residential because it's my favorite contract. Oh, again, did that slip out? Whoopsie. But yes, when the contracts change and there's a difference, I'll tell you where there's a difference, but they're exactly the same to this point. Again, occupancy and possession, this part is just the box in. They're just cleaning up the language. Be deemed to have is completely. This part, see rider pre-occupancy by buyer, that pre-occupancy and post-occupancy, I hate both of them. Oh, did I say that again? Those two have been updated, both of those riders. So that has been changed on both contracts as well. This has been changed, subject to lease. This is what has been changed. Let's look at it. If the property is subject to a lease, here we go, or any occupancy agreement, including seasonal and short-term vacation rentals, i.e. Airbnb. How many times do we have that Airbnb conversation, right? We knew they were going to do something about that because this has been something that has been ongoing and we're all going, I don't know, right? Like, how does this constitute? So if there is a lease or any type of occupancy agreement, seasonal and short-term vacation rentals, after the closing, either way, they have to give the contracts to the buyer within 5 days of the effective date. Okay, the buyer then has 5 days to determine if they accept them in their sole discretion. So this is a true contingency. They have 5 days to accept it. If they choose not to accept it, they get out of the contract and get their money back. If they choose to accept it, they move forward, right? So then they're also letting you know, because now they're adding in short-term, except that the tenant estoppel letter shall not be required on seasonal or short-term rentals, of course, because they do not have estoppel letters for that, right? So they had to add that language in there because this is now not just a regular lease. But they've added this because, and then they've also added that new addenda, if you remember, for seasonal and short-term rentals. So what does this have to do with? So if your property is with Airbnb and you have it rented for 2 months after the time that the property is set to close, what has to happen? Your buyer has to be approved by Airbnb, right? That's a process that has to happen. Then the buyer has to see these leases and they have to agree with the terms of these leases. That has to happen within 5 days of this executed agreement. And then they have 5 days to agree with these terms. If not, they get out of this contract. So I don't know the process. And so this is something we better get versed in with, for example, if it's an Airbnb thing, how long does it take for them to get approved by Airbnb? Like, does Airbnb take a long time to approve that? I don't know what that process looks like. So these are things that we're going to have to, if you're taking a listing where the seller is listing their property with Airbnb, we're going to need to ask that question. How long did it take you to get approved by Airbnb, right? Because I imagine there's some kind of a
approval. You just have to agree. The guy that purchased the 2 properties for me, he just had to agree that he wanted to keep with that same property manager and agree with the terms or how much of money they were going to get from each one of his properties.
and there's no length of time.
He just signed virtually.
He just signed his life away virtually. I would still like, now, see, if there is a contract where he's agreeing to stay with some kind of management company, that also has to be given. So any kind of a management agreement that would supersede the ownership time, anything that would convey beyond the ownership has to be given to them, and they have the right to review and accept. Remember, this is the craziest thing, and this is why I hate subject to, because a tenant, whether it's a long-term lease or even an Airbnb tenant, their usage rights, whether it be for a week, a month, or a year, supersedes the ownership of the owner. It's true. They have the right to be in there more than the owner does. Right? That's the whole point of tenancy. That is the craziest thing, which is one of the reasons I hate property management. So, and one of the reasons I didn't, well, it does for usage rights of that time frame, right? If that person paid the right to be in that unit for that week, that owner can't come in there. Right? Can they? They paid for the right. So their usage rights supersedes the rights of the owner.
Right.
That's the point. And it's a shortened period of time, but it is for that time.
Right.
And so that's why the buyer has to determine, are they comfortable agreeing with that?
They're getting these more tighter, very close to commercial.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing.
Because commercial, if you've got a tenant,
Exactly. You can't get them out, right?
Get them out until the end of the lease.
Well, the other thing is there's been a lot of cases coming out now where Airbnb, the people are coming in and ruining the properties. And I think because of that, people are getting more and more nervous when they're buying properties subject to that. They want to know that there's a liability. And I'm going to imagine, I didn't see it in this addenda, but I imagine if in the contracts you're getting from Airbnb, there's going to be probably more and more language about liability releasing from the company if there's damages. I mean, I just only imagine, right? So I'm thinking the same thing.
Does
But-
Airbnb have like its own insurance policy that the renter has to pay for? Or is it covered under the owner's?
That's a
insurance?
great
No,
question.
it's Airbnb.
They have their own little
They
thing,
charge
right?
you within their
Like-
rate or whatever it is.
Right,
that
that's what I
pays the-
thought. 'Cause I know
It's
they
kinda
do that
like-
for
it's kinda
RVs.
Like an
you
umbrella
do
policy?
It's like the mortgage insurance policy. That's what it's a renter's insurance.
Right.
policy.
I
That's
wonder
what I
how
thought.
much it covers though, like, you know,
Covers
it's-
pretty much everything.
It's pretty
It's-
good.
it?
Yeah,
It
because I was
covers
looking
the
at it for
fire, it
RVs.
covers damage, it covers everything.
that's pretty good.
It's pretty-
So I don't know if you guys heard that, but the question was, do they have their own insurance policy that covers the property while people are utilizing it? Now, Alan was saying that it does cover it's like a renter's policy and it covers everything during the usage period of it. So I'm not an expert on this, and but I think this is something that if you have a listing and it is part of that type of a program, you need to understand it, because we need to make sure that we understand what we're putting out there to the public and we get all of the right documentation to share with the buyer. Because what we don't want is to come to the end of it and they're like, oh, well, we never saw that management contract or something. You know what I mean? What that's going to do, guys, is just like an HOA. We're going to reopen up a contingency that will open up the opportunity for them to cancel in 5 days. And the worst part about it is we'll be in default because we were supposed to give it to them in 5 days. So if we never provided them that contract within 5 business days, our seller will be in default, right? The HOA, they just get 3 days to review and that gives them an out, but it doesn't say 3 days within the, XYZ time from the effective date. This is 5 days from the effective date. So in essence, if we don't give it to them in the timely manner, the seller's in default. So we have to really be on top of this one. Okay, we all go with that?
And make sure if your buyer is buying something, that there's not contracts longer than 60 days if they're buying it for the primary residence.
Oh, excellent point. Maria says, make sure if your buyer is buying this as a primary residence, there's no contracts that are longer than 60 days. 60 days, they have to be in it in 60 days or they're in default of their mortgage. Excellent point. Thank you. Any questions for myself, Maria, anybody?
For what kind of loan?
Primary
Any
residence.
mortgage, if your buyer is buying it for their primary residence, you always have to be able to occupy it, whether they do or don't.
Right.
They have to be able to occupy it within 60 days. So if you have an Airbnb rental in March and you're closing in January, technically all bets are off and we can't do it.
So
as a
they moved
primary.
that up to 60, but it used to be like 30. Didn't it?
60.
What if the house needs like rehab or you're planning on completely renovating the house?
As long as, I'm just saying as far as a
Rental.
rental.
Lisa.
Rental.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're not gonna know whether they actually moved into the house or not.
Oh.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's
they-
not if you
they have
actually
to be
use
able
the
to. Like,
house.
if you don't want to because the kitchen's not done, we're not gonna know.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when we're talking
So-
about
Tenants.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's saying if you, any type of loan, if you plan to use it as a primary residence, you must be able to take occupancy within 60 days, meaning you cannot have any rental, Airbnb or anything like that after 60 days. So you could have renovations or anything. It doesn't matter. They're not going to know what you're planning to fix it or something, but you cannot show any rental because obviously you wouldn't be able to take occupancy. So it's imperative that you don't show rental beyond 60 days. Everybody good? Okay.
I have one,
Yeah.
I have one question and maybe I could talk to you later about it because I might be the only one that deals with this, but I just took a new listing and it's horse stalls and an apartment and they have contracts for the season coming up.
For the
So-
horse stalls?
Yeah,
I don't think that would-
because everything
I
is
don't
very
think that
seasonal.
would matter because it's horse stalls. The rental
Unless
is,
the horse is staying in the house.
does the horse stay in a room? I think
Well,
you're good.
There's an apartment connected to it, but
Yeah, no,
okay,
no.
so,
You're good.
okay.
Because that's actually for the purpose of the horse, you're okay with that. This is an intention of the actual primary residence portion of the home.
Got it.
No, that was Stacy, but yeah, same market area. Yeah. Okay, she thought it was Tasha. Same area question. All right, this is another thing that I'm actually glad that they've added because I can't tell you how many times I've seen the assignability part not added, but only for people who are new to my team. Yes, nobody who has been on my team can answer this question. Only new people to my team. And you can't answer it either, Susan, because you know that's it. So Trish, this is Trish's question. Assignability. Here's the question. Buyer may assign and thereby be released from liability, may assign and not be released from liability, may not assign. Which one do you pick? Everybody knows I ask everybody this question. Why? Write a passage with me.
May not assign.
Why? She says may not assign. Why?
May not assign.
One she always checks. Everybody's been tortured by me with this question,
Okay, may not assign.
unless you worked investors, and then I never tortured you with this question. So Trish, what if you have somebody who has a family trust? I just tortured her. If you pick may not assign, how do they put it in their family trust name after?
May assign.
But which one? 1 or 2.
I deal with this a lot.
All right, we're gonna help. Okay, well, she wants to do it. She wants to do it. We're gonna let her do it.
May assign but not released from liability.
Woo! She got it right. Yes, may assign and not be released from
That's the
liability.
box you should always check.
Well, that's the box you want to check if it's going to be an LLC or a family trust. And you're going to have to explain it to the realtor on the other side, who's going to freak out and not know what that means because realtors never understand assignability. But the may assign and be released from liability truly is used only in wholesaling probably today. We used to use it in Baldwin Park when people would be building the condominiums. And I'd love to use this example because we actually did this. Let's say, Trish, you came in and you bought the first condo at 300,000. We had 3 price increases, 320, 340, 360. We went to 380. You're like, I'm ouch. Susan, you can buy it for me for 360. So Susan buys it for 360. She's now in contract with me. You made a quick 60 grand and you're in it at 360, but it's really 380 now. And now she's in it with the builder. And now Susan's with Centerline Homes with the build, and she's now in contract and you're out of it. That's how we used to use it back in the day. There's really nobody in residential real estate using it like that anymore. It's really no.
Well, the way prices are going up, you could.
Yeah, but after the whole mess of the, 2006, 2007, you don't see it's still too fresh.
Still
Too soon. Too many salt in the wounds there. Yeah, but anyway, so nobody really uses that anymore. But yes, so make sure you always ask: are you planning to put this in a family trust or an LLC? Do not assume to put may not assign, or leave it blank, because if you leave it blank, they now say if left blank may not assign. So that's the new edition, if left blank may not assign. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to go back to people and say, so guys, is this assignable or not? Because it's blank. And they're like, oh, I missed it. By the way, I'm just reminding everybody, there's stars on the left-hand side for a reason. To remind you, you're supposed to do something. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, a lot of people don't notice that. Yeah, people are like, I did that contract class yesterday. There's people in there from 20 years doing this. And they're like, when did they add those? Oh, I don't know. 20, 30 years. Yeah, that's 20, 30 years, since I've been doing this, that's 20 years. Yeah. Okay, so now the big changes. We all ready for my favorite change? Woo! Here we go. Financing. A. Ready for us? Let's get rid of the garbage. This is a cash transaction with no financing contingency. Boom. Mic drop. I love that. That is the best change. Thank you. Let's get rid of all that. Why would you say all that other stuff? You can get a loan, but if you get a loan, we're acknowledging there's a loan, but it has nothing to do with anything, but it's not going to matter. I mean, why are we saying all this? It's like,
Because attorneys make money doing it.
I know, but it's so confusing. You know how many questions I get on that on a daily basis? It's like, but Carrie, there's a loan. It doesn't matter. It's not contingent. But I don't understand. So now, no questions. You see this, guys? If you want to, can you have a loan in check A?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. There's no contingency. You can get a loan, not get a loan. There's just no contingency. It's super clear. You just check A. So when you're submitting an offer and you're doing this, you still have to show what? Proof of funds. If you're going to get a loan, nobody cares. You can't show the loan approval. You just show proof of funds. If they choose, hey, interest rates are really good and I still want to get some tax write-offs or whatever, fine, you can do that. But you don't show the other side. You only show proof of funds. We all super good on that? Okay, now let's move on to the next change, which I love too. I really love all of these financing contingency changes. They're so great. Okay, the beginning is kind of whatever. This contract is contingent within, if left blank, 30 days for loan approval period. Buyer obtaining a loan approval of, the normals, whatever, for a mortgage loan for the purchase of the property, fixed adjustable or adjustable fixed, blah, 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 not to exceed an initial interest rate of, guys, please don't forget to fill this in. If you're not putting in an interest rate to help reduce the risk for your buyer, you're missing an opportunity here. There's so many times I see people still writing in prevailing. When you see a percentage, that means you don't put in text. It means that, and if you have prevailing here, why would you write it here? It doesn't make any sense, right? It means, and I'm going to give the same story. So if you've heard this story before, I'm sorry, I'm going to tell the same story again. And this is a true story. So I'm going to tell it for those who haven't heard it before. In my international brokerage, so it was a while ago, interest rates were about 5.5%, had a buyer. She was approved, no problem, buying a home. We got right down to the wire, really. And years ago, she had a bankruptcy and a foreclosure was wrapped in that bankruptcy. Well, for some unknown reason, somebody didn't do it right. And the foreclosure did not close during the bankruptcy. Apparently, they closed it a year or two later, incorrectly, which they didn't find out until the very end of closing the loan. So, of course, there was a problem. And now her interest rate shot through the roof. Good news is she was still approved. Bad news is her interest rate went from 5.5 to 12. But because I put 6% in here, we got her out of this loan and got her money back because we capped her risk. Because if I left it blank, she still had the prevailing rate based on her creditworthiness. It was 12. She was still approved. You see this? That's the point of capping this. But she was able to get out.
But doesn't prevailing have to do with a national average or an average? Or
The
is it just-
prevailing rate based on her. So it was prevailing based on her creditworthiness.
Well, I assumed
But
it
it
was
does-
on the average.
No, the
Yeah.
average based on her rate of her creditworthiness.
It
it's-
doesn't really
Okay.
state that. That's.
It does because it says based on her creditworthiness. That's the kicker.
Good to
Oh,
know.
The kicker is her credit. If they didn't say her creditworthiness,
yeah.
it wouldn't have anything to do. Then you just said whatever the the rate was of that day.
Yeah.
Because the rate of that day was 5.5% when she closed. Well, it wasn't her rate anymore because she had a freaking foreclosure now. That was within the 7 years.
And you're good to do that too, because rates are probably moving up.
Well,
So you might
exactly.
Want to set a little bit of a cap somewhere.
So.
But things
question,
happen. Little darkness sometimes pops in.
Can the lender like lock in their rate during a pre-approval or a contract? So like, how do you know what rate to put on there?
Right.
Well, you want to
You can
go.
call
What?
and ask.
Yeah, I always do too. Like, let's say I'm working with Maria. I'll say, what is the rate today? What do you think? So she said, what's today's rate? 3.25, 3.5,
Yeah,
3.25. So I might say, okay, I'll go to like 3.5, right? And then I'll put 3.5, like where I think it'll go to.
Okay.
I always give a little buffer, because if I wrote 3.25 here, I know me as a listing agent, I'm gonna say, yeah, right. Like it's not gonna go up at all. And I'm gonna kick that
And
back.
if it ends up going over 3.5, the buyer
Has the opportunity to
Is the-
cancel
but also has the option to move forward.
and has the option to move forward. You just
Okay,
give the
so
buyer
it just
both
gets-
opportunities.
Okay.
There's a little bit of wiggle room there too, because it doesn't talk anywhere about points. I quote no points, but technically a buyer could get 3.25. Let's say rates moved up, they could still get 3.25 and have to pay points for it.
Yeah.
So there could still be some room there to protect.
There
yourself,
could be
but-
wiggle room, but it
you
says
don't
an
want-
initial interest rate.
We're working based on just strictly buyers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sellers, 'cause
right.
if
Yes.
you're working
This
for the
is to
seller,
Yeah,
you're gonna want to come back and change that clause to prevail.
of course.
I'm just saying.
Of course, but I mean, realistically, if I'm the listing agent too, and if I see that you put 3.5, I'm not going to be that worried about it because I figure it's pretty okay. If you put 3.25, I'm going to come back and say no. I'm going to come back and counter on that for sure. Which we've done that before. We had a foreign national that came in right on the dot, and then we said no. We countered on that because we knew it's not going to close at that.
Yeah.
So you have to know what that is. But if I'm representing the buyer, I'm not leaving it blank. Because you're not protecting your buyer. And if you're writing prevailing, it's just stupid because they write prevailing. So why would you do that? Okay, just saying that because it's a pet peeve.
Because I accept offers all the time with prevailing rate because.
Yeah, for the
Yeah,
seller, it
yeah.
doesn't matter. It just, for me, it's a pet peeve because it's retarded because why would you write prevailing in there? Because it's a percentage rate. It's just little things like that that give me a twitch, Like this one, I'm just gonna say it right up here. When you're writing the money, you see there's a dollar sign here and it says balance to close and people write balance.
Yes, or percentages. That's
Yeah.
my favorite.
Why would you write
I don't have to
balance?
figure that out.
It didn't ask you balance. You actually have to do the math. You just take the number and you subtract and you subtract and you get the number. It's like very, very clear. I don't understand why people can't do math, but anyway, it just drives me nuts.
That's why they're starting to do all the percentages.
Because you can't do the math. I know, it's so painful. It really scares me. It's so bad. And the other thing, guys, too, that I am going to mention, just because it drives me crazy as well, is make sure that you are filling in the title company information here because DBPR is out in force. And as a matter of fact, they said in another broker meeting, if you haven't been audited this week, you probably will be next week. I was like, yay, I can't wait. So exciting to welcome him in. So if DBPR comes in the office, run, just don't talk to them.
Just keep it moving.
Just say, hi, I have a meeting and run. Like, just don't talk to anybody because they try to be really nice and they want all sorts of information from you. Don't say anything. And Carrie's just never here. Okay. Even if I'm right there, you don't know who I am. And I don't run multiple. No, I don't run multiple offices. Don't ever say that. Oh my God. No, that's really bad. Then they're like, oh, she does? I can audit more offices. So it's really, really bad. So don't know that. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
I'm sure they have a list. so
Oh,
they know.
Well, they do now because last time they came in, Cindy told them that. I was like, no. So anyway, okay. So now let's go into the next part that I love. So now we talked about the creditworthiness. Now here you go. This is the best part. Ready? Buyer's mortgage. Okay, so here we go. We just talked about the initial interest rate, the prevailing rate. Okay. Then 2, buyer's mortgage broker or lender having received an appraisal or alternate valuation of the property satisfactory to the lender if either required by the lender, which is sufficient to meet the terms required for the lender to provide financing for the buyer to proceed to closing. So what are they saying here? They're now saying that all of this must be done within the 30 days. Loan appraisal must happen within the loan approval time. Oh, let's keep reading. This is getting.
What is that?
I like that. Isn't that fun?
But it's not the 30 days, it's whatever the number.
Whatever
is.
you've written in.
Right.
If left blank 30 days,
So
if you
when
put
you're doing
financing.
15, don't do that.
Yeah, if you
because
put
it takes
15,
too
you're
long.
like really in trouble because you're never going to get an appraisal 15. Yes, you have still 5 days, blah, blah,
You
blah.
know, black people don't go and see what it is.
Now also here, we have the same thing about the buyer has to use good faith and diligent effort to obtain the loan financing and to meet the appraisal terms, guys. This is a new one. They're adding, so it's not only diligent effort to get the loan, but also to meet the appraisal terms within the loan approval period. So what does that mean? You actually have to order it right up front. You cannot wait. You must pay for it. So they don't want you to wait for your inspection and then get your appraisal. So if you do that, you're not using diligent effort anymore and you could be found in default.
I like this.
I know. I thought you might. That's a new thing. Mhm. So that is something new that they have added. Mhm.
So Carrie, I asked something with that. So just to be clear, the banks, I typically work with cash a lot, but when I do have a financing deal, that bank is ordering the appraisal, not me.
Yes, but probably what happens is a lot of buyers are saying, a lot of agents do this. They say, let's tell the lender to wait to order the appraisal until our inspection. That's what they do because they want to make sure the inspection's clean before they waste the money on the appraisal. That's how it's looked at. But you can't do that anymore because, first of all, it takes too long to get the appraisal. And because we're having so many issues with the appraisal, taking so long and delaying the closings and having this all fall apart at the end, that's why they're addressing all of this. So now what they're saying in this whole thing, which we're going to go through, is that the appraisal or evaluation, whatever that the bank is requiring, must happen and be finalized within the loan approval period, whatever time frame that is, 30 days, 45 days, whatever you set. It all has to be determined and settled within that time frame. And the buyer must use diligent effort, not only to make all the applications that they have to do for the loan, but also for the appraisal to have happened and been decided within that time frame. So that means ordering it in a timely fashion.
Yeah, because when we order it, we still have to get your credit card information.
Which
So
means you have to
sometimes
pay for it
they
up front.
don't- You know, we
Yeah.
may place the order.
But you don't have the money to pay
Yeah,
for it,
yeah.
right? Like Marie's saying, sometimes you order it, but you don't have the money to pay for it. They actually have to give the credit card to pay for it. If they don't give their money to pay for it, then they're not using diligent effort, and therefore the buyer is now in default of contract. If that's the case, if they say, listen, we don't have the appraisal in time, why? We didn't get the buyer's credit card, the buyer will be found in default and lose their deposit.
Carrie, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So we had a situation where we were representing the buyers and the seller of the house was actually a real estate agent. And she knew that there were some comps that would be considered but weren't closing. So she actually ended up putting off the appraisal, scheduling the appraisal so that.
Well, in that instance,
those-
yeah, but in that instance, first of all, if the buyer paid for it already, your buyer's not in default, number one. Number
Right.
two, if that's the case and you knew about that, I would have done an addenda to extend.
Okay, to extend the closing.
No, I would extend the financing period.
Oh, right, sure,
loan approval
sure.
period.
Yeah, we actually did extend the financing, but they're not allowed to prohibit it on the other side, are they?
No. No, they can't.
Okay,
Both buyer and seller have to agree if there's ever going to be a change to anything in the contract. So if the seller's like, listen, I know these comps are going to help, would you be willing? And they say no, so sorry, so sad, you move forward with your appraisal and that's it.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Can the buyer pay for the appraisal up front and like just instruct the lender to hold off?
No.
No,
No.
because if they hold off and they don't have the appraisal in time,
Yeah,
then the buyer's in default.
but they pay for it.
Doesn't matter. If it's not back in time by the loan approval period, because the lender has to be able to say within that loan approval period whether you're approved or you're not approved.
Mhm.
And if they cannot, with diligent effort, say we are approved or we're not approved within the 30 days or whatever that time frame is, because the buyer did not allow for them to get that done in the window that they needed, it is the buyer's fault, therefore the buyer's in default.
Well, as before, you could have the loan approval and it didn't matter about the appraisal.
Yeah, now it
matters.
does. Now
the
the
difference.
appraisal is part of,
Of the
it's no
approval.
longer you're approved pending the appraisal,
Right.
right? That used to be the like condition.
Right.
Now that is no longer, it has to be the approval as part of the appraisal,
Mm.
or the appraisal is part of the approval. I think I said that backwards, yeah. Mhm. And they're doing that because how many deals have fallen apart because of that?
Yeah.
Like 90%,
Yeah.
right?
Dumb question. What is the date?
November 1st.
I've heard of new construction not appraising.
Oh.
Multiple.
Well, that's not a surprise with
Yeah.
those price increases.
Yeah.
Surprise. The problem is they don't care. And
Next
they're
time.
not using these contracts and they don't care.
Yeah.
They use whatever contracts they want. And you know what they're saying? We can just resell it for 100 grand more. So whatever, take it or leave it. And we're keeping your deposit, by the way. Although I am seeing a softening in new construction because they keep sending us stuff
Yeah.
and they keep seeing 3% commission.
Inventory and
Uh-huh.
commission.
Are they starting to have some inventory
Surprise.
now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
DR Horton has like a list.
It's surprising, yeah. Okay, back to the contract. So let's keep moving. So everybody, so here we go. Right here it says, very interesting. Buyer's failure to use good faith and diligent effort to obtain the loan approval during the loan approval period shall be considered default under the terms of the contract. For the purposes of this provision, diligent effort includes, but is not limited to, furnishing all documents and information required by the buyer's mortgage broker and lender and paying for the appraisal and other fees and charges in connection with the buyer's application for financing. I knew you'd love that. Mhm. Buyer shall, upon written request, keep the seller and broker informed about the status of the buyer's mortgage loan application, loan processing, appraisal, and loan approval, including any property related conditions and loan approval. Buyer authorizes, again, keeping everybody informed, and keep, like normal. If within the loan approval period, buyer obtains the loan approval, buyer shall notify seller of same in writing prior to the expiration of the loan approval period. Or if buyer is unable to obtain the loan approval period within the loan approval period, but they are satisfied with their ability to obtain a loan approval and proceed to closing, right? The buyer shall deliver written notice to the seller confirming same prior to the expiration of the loan approval period. So, and if they can't, they still have to let them know in writing. So what do they say? If they say, I am getting loan approval, I want to move on, they have to let you know in writing. If they say, I haven't gotten loan approval, but I want to move on, they have to let you know in writing. If they say, I haven't gotten loan approval and I want to cancel, they have to let you know in writing. So no matter what happens, they got to let you know in writing by the end of the loan approval period. What happens if they don't? Three things. Well, two things really. One, let's say you're supposed to, loan approval period ends at day 5 and you're closing day 10. Shane is representing the buyer. Susan is representing the seller. Shane Says nothing. Susan calls me, Carrie, it's day 6. I didn't hear from Shane. Uh-oh, should I call him? Well, what happened, Susan? Well, my seller has this great backup offer, all cash, ready to close. We love Shane. But Shane didn't do his job.
So sad.
Shane's gonna be in trouble. Shane would never do that. And we would have called Shane ahead of time. So Shane's clearly not the one would have done it. He must have gone crazy.
I've been Susan in this situation.
Yes, you have been, Susan. But Susan Seller could do what? Day 6, 7th, and 8th. What could Susan Seller do?
Last time I took the escrow.
Well, in this instance, he can't keep the escrow, but Susan Seller can cancel the contract, move forward with his cash backup. And Shane receives a lovely email that says, I'm so sorry, Shane. I don't know what the heck happened to you and your buyers, but here's your release and cancellation and their money back. They can just get it from the title company. And Shane's buyer said, Shane, our moving truck is coming. Where are we gonna live? And now Shane has very long-term guests living in his house.
Airbnb.
This is not a good situation.
What if they refuse to sign the cancellation?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. They're in default.
Okay.
It's the seller's right to do that. So don't be that. Don't be
So-
Shane.
So the 5th is the day it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
The
The-
6th, they can technically.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah,
5th, you just have
But
to
only the
notify.
6th, 7th, and 8th, but on the
3
9th.
days.
Then it's only 3 days. The 6th, 7th, and 8th is the days, the 3 days after the loan approval period, the seller has the right to cancel the contract, must give back the deposit to the buyers because we're assuming they would close, right? And move forward with whatever offer or not move forward. Like we've had sellers that wanted to get out and this was their opportunity to get out and not move and, stay in their home. I mean, we've had this, trust me, guys, I've had this happen a lot of times. I can't tell you. I've had sellers waiting and agents call me, Carrie, how do we get out of this contract? And I say, well, your best bet is if that agent does not notify you. And guys, it's not a phone call. And as of November 1st, it's not a text. We can no longer use text messaging as written notification. That is the worst one out of all the changes to us realtors.
Where is that?
We'll get to it. It's under
Okay.
notification. Written notification no longer constitutes a text. So you must do it in text, in an email format, in a letter that, what are you going to send it snail mail? That's retarded. You can drop it off in person. Stupid. So really the only thing you can do is send an email and you can text and say, I sent you an email, but I mean, seriously, the text message no longer counts.
Does it address postmarks or what? Like if you did actually.
It says you can mail it, but it's stupid. I mean, why would you do that? It's retarded. I don't, or you can fax it. Who
Well, 'cause
faxes? Nobody has a fax machine.
There's no way to verify a text.
Yeah, I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
you can go in your contacts and change the person's number
yeah.
and say that it's not a text to somebody else.
So that's the biggest thing that
that's
you guys
super good.
all need to be very aware of. You can no longer consider a text message written notification. Now, I would suggest always keep all your text messages and keep them somewhere if you ever need to, keep notifications of everything that happened as record of things that have happened. It's always good to know for your communication. There's nothing wrong with that as backup. And, God forbid you ever need to keep a timeline of something, that's fine. But in terms of for contract purposes, written notification, they're not considering a text written notification. So this must be an email. And that's why if God forbid you had to send me written notification, you better text me, tell me you sent me written notification.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay, it's a good thing I'm not on that side. So that's my point. So be very, very cautious. If you're on the buyer side, you better put that date in there, loan approval date. You better put the day before, send written notification of loan approval. Or not loan approval. Even if they didn't get it, but they want to move forward, you need to send them that, right? Now, here's another thing, guys. If they do not get the loan and they are going to back out, you have to send a denial that explains why they're denied. It has to be proof from the bank why they're denied. And if it has anything to do with diligent effort, guess what? They're not going to get their deposit back. So remember that too. And that's good also if they're on the other side. But again, remember, FREC disbursement order, right? That only happens when a brokerage holds the escrow, which I can count on my one hand how many brokerages actually still hold escrow, because that's a huge opportunity for auditing. We don't want that. So really, it's up to whatever title company you're working with to see how they hold, handle escrow disputes. We don't know that. So I'm just going to say, in general, understand when you're working with a title company and you're choosing your partners, ask them how they handle an escrow dispute before you partner with somebody. You're going to need to know that. You might think a title company is great until you're in an escrow dispute. So before you choose as a listing agent who you're going to work with, ask them how to handle an escrow dispute. All right. Moving
what is
on.
the good to escrow? What is the good of the escrow? Just like
You want somebody who's going to help
you.
you to be in your corner to try to work between both parties to come to an amicable solution. You don't want somebody who's going to send a letter and say, good luck to you. Because that's what a lot of companies do. They send a letter and they say they have to figure it out amongst themselves.
What
Yeah,
if you
like
can't
that's
get
going to work. Huh?
Also, Carrie, this happened to me, and I think we talked about this, is what if they can't get insurance on the property? Does this, and this is during that loan approval time.
Insurance is
get-
different. If you can't get insurance and you have a loan, you can't get a loan, right? Because the lender's not going to give you a loan if you can't get insurance. So that is a totally different thing. You would be denied a loan based on the fact that you can't get insurance. That's a totally different thing. And
So that's the
obviously,
contingency on that. Okay.
Approval period or not technically?
well, you should have already gotten your insurance, no?
A
Before you
lot of people wait. I tell them.
Well, you better make sure that they get their insurance before the loan approval period ends, because if not,
Okay.
yeah.
And especially honestly, the way premiums are going up, if you have an
Yeah.
iffy deal, a higher
point.
insurance premium can put them over the debt income.
Yes, great point. Maria said, because the way that the insurance premiums.
The
and whatnot-
roofs, the roof deals right now. If the roof isn't like 10 years old, some insurance companies aren't covering them right now.
Which is so ridiculous, but it's all about
That's what
the
I'm
risk.
running
and
into.
It's all BS, but the point is that you better do it early on, because like she's saying, if it goes too high, it throws off their debt to income ratio. If they're already approved for the mortgage and you're past the loan approval period, you may not get their money back. I mean, so you got to be really, really careful here. So make sure they're on top of those things from day one. Okay, moving on, because we don't have too much time and I want to make sure we get through these changes. All right, so again, want you to see here, default. What they're saying here about the default, basically, again, the most important thing is they're saying if there is default, if the buyer fails to timely deliver written notice and to the seller prior to the end of the expiration period, the buyer shall proceed to closing and they'll be expected to close, right? But if they don't close, and they have received loan approval, they will receive their money back unless the default is because the seller's inability to take care of some contingencies of the property, like normal, or property-related conditions of the loan approval, specifically excluding the appraisal valuation. That's it. Nothing about the loan appraisal here. Remember how it used to call out specifically the appraisal of the property was insufficient to meet the terms of the loan appraisal? How scary that I know that word for word. That is gone. None of these things have anything to do with now buyer getting their money back. That of all, the whole thing here is totally saying the appraisal is now part of the financing contingency. It is part and parcel of that loan approval period. It must be handled and done and taken care of during that 30, 45 days, whatever you write in there. The buyer must do diligent effort by making sure it is done in a timely manner, paid for in a timely manner, and everything must be settled within that time frame. So therefore, this will not carry on past the loan approval, because that's what's been happening, right? You get loan approval, oh, and then the appraisal comes back and it's too low. And now
Or it
we're
has condition issues.
Oh, exactly, or there's conditions about, none of that. All of that is over. This new financing contingency is very clean. It is very clean. A, you're either cash, no other contingency, or B, you're financing, but everything having to do with financing will be done within that loan approval period. It's very
more pressure,
clean.
but it's better.
It is more pressure, but it is so much cleaner. And if you're worried about it, then give a longer financing period. Give yourself 40 days. you know,
And
45
then you have
days.
to like dispute the appraisal and all that stuff.
That's what I'm saying. Give yourself a longer period of time, or you're gonna have to extend, do an extension on the loan approval period.
Yeah.
Mhm. But, you know, at least it's not gonna be unclear. Well, do we get our money back? Do we not get our money back? Is it still part of the, you know, it was very unclear before. And that's the reason that they made these huge changes, because so many issues with appraisals. So I think it's great that they did this. This is the biggest things. I will show you the other biggest change.
What does this do to all the people that are still offering over appraisal, even though we know it? So this cuts all that out too, right?
It really does. Yeah. All those people writing in the BS, you know, waiving appraisal contingency. Well, you're not really waiving appraisal contingency. If you're waiving appraisal contingency, then you pick A. Right? You can't take it out of your financing. Is the lender going to not give you a loan if you don't have an appraisal contingency? No. That's the thing. So that really takes care of that part of it, the contract. That's exactly right. So, I mean, you could write whatever you want on there, but you wrote it before anyway. It didn't mean anything.
Yeah, you can.
Well, you said that, but that didn't really mean you could, because the lender might not have agreed with that. Because the lender could come back and say, well, actually, then you're no longer approved because it throws off your debt to income, and we're going to deny you now. Because that's what was happening. People would say, I'm going to come with $20,000 above the appraisal or whatever, right? And then they would get a denial from the lender because they'd say, oh, it threw off your debt to income ratio. It was happening all the time. Whatever people were writing, I would say it would give the warm fuzzies for the buyers and sellers, but it was BS. You couldn't hold anybody accountable because it came down to whatever the lender was going to do anyway. So the real thing was when a listing agent called me with that, I said, you better call the lender and ask them, really, at what point we're going to give them a denial.
Yeah, and especially if it's a higher loan to value.
Mhm.
If it's a 50% loan to value, yeah. you
Yeah.
got room. But if
We saw many 20% with high-end loans, like we're talking $1 million loans, that they still denied. Because they said, well, they never showed me their other cash. I mean, ridiculous. Like, we know you're buying $1.2 million, you're putting 20% down, you got the money, but they never showed them the money, so they were able to deny them. Yeah. So
Hey, Carrie, Janet just asked in the chat if the seller promised to put on a new roof. that
that's
should be
different.
What do you say?
If the seller asked to put on a new roof, what?
Janet asked if the seller promised to put on a new roof, then this should be addressed in regard to the loan approval process clause.
No, that would be buyer and seller agree. Seller would put on a new roof at seller's cost prior to closing and have nothing to do with the loan approval.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, unless it was, VA or FHA, maybe.
well, and it still needs to get on before closing. How is that going to happen these days?
Oh,
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
roof
true.
within-
Prior to
within that.
closing.
And nobody's going to let you lend without a good one.
Yeah, I've had denial because of that.
We would deny it if the
Well,
roof isn't on.
yeah, well, then that's the thing. You have to go get estimates. You'd have to find out how long it's going to take to get it on there. And you may have to do an extension on the closing until you can find out how long it's going to take to get the roof on there. And then you have to make sure that the appraisal comes out after the roof is
Again,
on there.
so you get another-
Well, you probably wouldn't get the appraisal done until you had the roof put on, right? Why would you even bother? It'd be a waste to have it done the first time. So there's going to have to be some upfront work by the seller to figure out how long it's going to take to get that roof done, But yeah, it could be done for sure. But it wouldn't really have anything to do with financing. It has more to do with delaying the closing, and you'd want to extend the financing period. Okay, but I really want to show you too is that you see, oh, they did change this a little bit, not really much. The seller shall pay in full prior to the time of closing any assessments to the public body. This is that one. Remember, guys, seller shall pay assessments in full prior to closing. Buyer shall pay assessments installments after closing. They just changed the language a little bit, but this has nothing to do with condominium or homeowners association. People always get confused. They never know what this has to do with. Just a good example is if maybe they widened the road near your home and maybe they charged every homeowner who was there for the widening of that road. Or maybe they cleaned up a waterway and they had to fix the natural fauna and flora. The EPA came in and they charge all the homeowners. That's what that kind of thing is for. You don't see that often, which is why it always cracks me up how people get all upset about the A and the B here. But in reality, that's what that's for. Okay, not a big change there. They took out the national flood thing. That doesn't really affect us. But the other really big one, and we kind of hit on it once before, but I do want to talk about it again. And I really don't see us, time is of the essence. It doesn't really change anything. They're just calling out what we already knew, that if it ends on a national or a public holiday or a Saturday or Sunday, it goes to the next day, business day, which we already knew. But it kind of calls it out in a clearer fashion. But what they changed is force majeure. You might as well just call it, it's a catch-all for any possible thing that could go wrong. So basically they're saying if a buyer or seller can't do what's required or exercise or perform any right or obligation, so pretty much anything under the contract, or be liable to each other for damages for so long as performance or non-performance for any right or obligation of any service or insurance or required approvals or essential to closing is disrupted, delayed, or caused by a force majeure event. I love how they're doing this. Which is hurricanes, floods, extreme weather, earthquake, fires, or acts of God. That's one of the normal ones. Unusual transportation delays, wars, insurrections. Here we go. Civil unrest, acts of terrorism, governmental actions and mandates, governmental shutdowns, epidemics, or pandemics.
Wow.
So basically, anything that could possibly happen is going to be covered under force majeure. So how does that affect that? They're saying that if something happens, there's a shutdown and you can't get an inspector in because no inspectors are working. So from the day that it starts working again, you will have an extension up to 7 days to allow for that to happen. Now, I'm going to tell you, I would write an addenda anyway, right? Really what I see this whole long, huge paragraph of gobbledygook is for attorneys, right? This is for attorneys to use if things can't close, if they need to try to fight for money or get out of a contract, they're going to go here. I think people in a normal transaction who can't do something because of this are going to just write addendums anyway, right? Because realistically, somebody has COVID, you can't go in because they're sick. We're going to write an addendum, right? I mean, we're going to work through a situation like that. So this isn't really for a one-off, like a specific situation. This is more grandiose kind of a situation. There's a governmental shutdown, so we can't have any kind of services. I mean, I don't know what you're going to do about that, right? So these are really like a large, so it's just a very, very clever way for them to put kind of like a catch-all for any possible thing that could happen in a contract, so that Lord forbid you need a way to say to get out of a contract or to try to get your money back. That's, I think, what's the point of having that in there.
It's interesting with the pandemic is on there. I mean, you could say, well, the pandemic is still going on a year and a half, 2 years later.
I know, exactly. I mean, pretty soon they'll start putting
pandemic.
Yeah.
Pandemic happened, exactly. So I'm not really sure, but again, how would we use it? I don't think we're going to ever use it. I mean, the reality is, listen, we've known forever, if a hurricane's coming, you can't bind insurance. Therefore, we know these things that are coming. COVID, Delta's coming. You can't what? Right?
You can't, right?
I don't know how that's gonna, no open house. I don't really know how that's gonna, so it's kind of bizarre, but I think the reason they added all that language is, again, there's probably just a lot of people fighting for variety. I mean, we had a lawsuit. It was a specific performance suit that we were a seller. There was a buyer on the other side. It was like a $2.5 million property, and they were trying to get out. We sued them to close. They sued us to sell. It was hysterical, and they tried to use force majeure. Are you kidding me? Over COVID. The guy didn't have it. We didn't have it. There was nothing that caused COVID. All services were working. There was no. Yeah, they lost. Anyway. We won. Yay. But I mean, it didn't make any sense, like, come on, don't be a jerk about it. We put $50,000 of work into this house to make it exactly the way the guy wanted it. And he just changed his mind. And then he just tried to be clever to get out of it. I mean, it's like, come on. It's not, let's have our cake and eat it too clause. But it kind of is now. I mean, whatever.
So what exactly would the difference say that you would write? Just
No, the addendum would be based upon the situation, if you need to extend something or, that's typically what a force majeure thing is. I would suggest, like, let's say there was a hurricane, right? So force majeure typically will extend everything for a certain period of time. I would also always recommend that you extend inspections. And I would also write that you're extending your loan approval. I would write to extend all those things just because it's better to be over communicative than not. Is it necessary? Not really, because we do have the force majeure clause in here. But I would write it because I think it's better to be over communicative in a sense of just because in that scenario. So all parties are on the same page. You know what I mean? Because force majeure is kind of ambiguous in my opinion. Okay, everybody clear on that? So that's really the big changes. There's some little minor things. The FERPTA, one thing they did change is that the seller has to pay for the servicing of that, which I think they paid it anyway, but they wrote it in here. And that's really all the changes. So I think we got through it. Woohoo! Are you guys impressed?
Yes.
Yay! All right. Okay, so Monday, 10 a.m. I was going to do another YouTube class. And Dr. Phillips, what do you guys think? You want to do more YouTube, or you want to do? Yeah, we're good with YouTube. I want to do more defining the 5 things that it takes to make your YouTube go viral. You like it? Okay, so we'll do that on Monday. And then as at 10. And then as you know, next Thursday, let's pull this up, is going to be this thing, the town hall. So that is next Thursday, and that is with Budge and Christine, and we have a lot of people from Sotheby's. So that'll be the town hall. I will be here if anybody wants to join me here, and it will be virtual, so it's going to be great. So I look forward to seeing anybody who'd like to join me. If anyone's going to tell me that they're going to be here, I'll get food. If I knew people were going to come, I would have gotten food today. I just didn't know if anyone would be here. But I had good people here. See, next time tell me you're coming, I'll bring food. So great seeing everybody. If anybody has any questions about anything we covered, hop on. Nobody? Anybody?
No,
I do.
I loved it, Carrie. Thank you.
Yeah. What you got, Mark?
So when do we start using these updated contracts? Does it begin today or is it November 1st?
November 1st. You know
Okay.
what? It'll be, we'll switch it into our dot loop. So you can't use it until we switch it into our dot loop.
Okay, and then the in lieu repairs clause that Phil Logos wrote, those are still good for
Yeah.
these as well?
Yeah, that's always good.
Okay, and the last question I have with the in lieu thing, because it says either, if we were to have, let's say, for example, 10,000 that we are requesting for concession, do we put 0 in for where it says off the purchase price and then 10,000? So that's acceptable. It doesn't need to be like one or the other.
Right. Or you could even take some of that out. You don't have to have both.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was allowed.
Yeah. He kind of gave us a catch all.
Okay.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining. I hope you got something new. I'm really
Thank you,
excited about
Carrie.
those. You're welcome. Those are some clean changes, except for remember, no texting for written notification, and don't do a change.
That's so hard.
Okay, guys, have a great rest of your day. And hey, nobody's notified me. I've only met with a couple people for business planning. Does nobody want to hit 25 million next year? Come on. Okay, excellent.
I knew.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.